Hi, I'm here with
Marina Jansen.
who worked on How to Dance in Ohio. So a lot of people use the catch-all term of swing to refer to anybody who covers a role. Were you a swing or were you considered an understudy or a standby or something else?
A lot of people called us understudies, and that's actually how we were referred to by stage management. And we were billed as swings in the playbill. And then during, I think, the reprint or after previews, we were billed as understudies. A lot of people use the terms interchangeably. I'm one of those people who I think it's really important to use the correct job title for what you are. I'm particular like that. So I was considered a principal swing because I was an offstage member of the cast, whereas an understudy is an onstage member of the cast, typically in the ensemble. But you've seen the show, we don't have an ensemble. It was a little different with our show because we were covering lead roles or principal roles because there was no sort of ensemble. So yeah, the terminology is very interchangeable, but I always say I'm swing.
So what roles did you swing for in the show?
I swung for 5 roles. I covered Ashley Migo, Mel, Meredith, Caroline, and Jessica. So I covered all 5 of those roles. 4 of the autistic group members, and then Ashley.
And how many of those roles did you end up going on for?
I went on for 2. I went on for Ashley and Migo, and I went on for Mel.
How did you end up finding out about How to Dance in Ohio?
I remember the exact location. I remember it. I was doing a contract in Raleigh. I was living at the place where I go to school, Elon and commuting. And I was in rehearsals, and one day my friend was over at the place I was staying, and they were like, "There's a show about autism coming to Broadway." And I was like, "Stop lying." And I was like, "Okay, haha, that's funny." I was like, "Yeah, that doesn't exist." And she was like, "No, it's actually like I'm looking at the audition breakdown." I'm like, what the heck? Hold on. And I look at the breakdown. It was on Instagram, which was very new because you don't always see Broadway auditions on Instagram. Like that was very cool and interesting, but also very uncommon. And I look at the breakdowns and I'm like, oh my God, this is like me. And I just did a bunch of research and I'm like, oh, okay, this show is good. And I was like, okay, I need to be in it. Now, I was like, it's not only like my type as a performer, but it's like, oh, I vibe with this show. So that was July of last year, 2023. So I didn't know about it at all before then.
What was the audition process like for How to Dance in Ohio?
So typically when you audition for a Broadway show, because I have a lot of friends and classmates on Broadway, especially when you're auditioning for something that is the original cast and not a replacement, it's like can be like months long process. So I was very surprised that they were looking to cast someone in August for a show that will open in December. Like that's like not a lot of time. So I initially sent in a self-tape, I want to say mid-July, and I heard back pretty quickly that they wanted some more material. I sent in another self-tape and I did some material from the show. I believe it was maybe 2 or 3 self-tapes before I was invited to the final callback in New York City, which was just freaking out, which was just absolutely insane. So I went to the final callback, and there were 2 days, and I was on the second day, and I had more material from the show. I had 2 sides, which are like snippets of the script, and I had 2 songs for the characters, Ashley, Migo, and Caroline. So I sang Slow Dancing, I sang Life Interrupts, which sadly was cut from the
RIP
show.
Life Interrupts.
But I did sing it, and I did sing it when the key was a lot higher. And I read for Caroline, I read for Ashley, and I went into a room, and it was a big, long table of people. It was Tammy Cannell, the director. It was Lily Ling, and the music director. Just a lot of the creative team members were there, and I sang and I read, and it went very well. I was very happy with it, and they were very welcoming. And I had a little break, and then I came back for the dance call, which we did the combo from the Second Chance dance, and that also went really well. It was very low stakes. It was very chill. It wasn't like get it right, it's Broadway. It was more about like having fun and feeling the energy. And I was expecting to wait like a while, and I got the call the next day, and I booked it, which was crazy. Very lucky.
What was the rehearsal process like, especially being a swing?
A lot. It's hard. We rehearsed for probably about 3.5 weeks at New 42nd Studios in Times Square, which is where a lot of Broadway shows and really professional regional theaters rehearse. We, as the Swings, were mostly new additions to the cast. 5 out of the 7 of us were all like completely new to the show. Marina and Martin Solat had been involved with the show before, but not as Swings. So we came in a few days before and kind of had a talk with the assistant director, the music director, about how things would kind of go for us. They gave us our coverage breakdown, basically who's covering what roles, who's the primary cover, who's the secondary cover, who's the tertiary cover, because we got a few of those. My primaries were Mel and Meredith. The secondaries were Ashley, Jessica, and Caroline. Ashley, I actually went on for the most amount of times, even though she is, and that's the role I made my Broadway debut with, because the coverage was Marina Marina Pierce was primary, but Marina was also the only swing for all the adult characters. So Marina went on all the time. All the time. And we learned the music individually. It was like a 2-hour session with just someone from the music team just teaching us all the music at once. And that was a lot because there was no cast album. There was the EP, but most of the songs I had never heard of. I didn't even know the plot of the show because I didn't have the script until the first day of rehearsal. So we kind of had a few days, just the swings. Then we had a few days later, I think it was around October 9th, we had the full meeting of the full cast. We had design presentations from the set designers, from the costume designers. We met all the producers and just a lot of the media people were there. We had that day, we had a lot of meetings with Equity, just about legal stuff and union. We had a reading and the first sing through. And then it was basically blocking the show. That process went pretty fast because the show had been workshopped with basically the same cast recently over the past few years. So they already knew the material and everything. For being a swing, it was really difficult to pick up a lot of new information at once. And they did advise us to only focus on our first primary assignment, but I'm myself and I want to do everything at once. So I wrote down 5 people's blockings at once, and we definitely bonded very quickly and learned kind of our own system for picking up material very quickly, and definitely helped each other out a lot. There's so many times where I was like, Ayana, does Jessica enter through wing 2 or 1? And just a lot of that. Yeah, we were basically in the back of the room for the entire time, but there were some times where on-stage members would step out for costume fittings. We would step in for rehearsal. I stepped in for rehearsal a lot. There were times where they would do run-throughs of the show and the swings would go and rehearse in another room, kind of get on our feet.
What was your process of keeping track of all of your different tracks?
Very organized when it comes to that. I was very meticulous. Definitely color coding was a big part of that for me. When I got the physical script, I had both a digital and physical copy of the script. And at first, I wrote down all the blocking in colored pencils corresponding with each character's color in certain sections. So Mel would always be on the left side, and Jessica would always be on the right side, and Ashley would always be in the middle. That's just how my brain works. And it was a lot of writing. My page was just covered in notes, and my hands would hurt after the first week, and it's rehearsal, so you change everything, so I would have to erase it, and that wasn't really working. So what I did is I made a map of the stage, and it's on Google Slides, and I did a 2-scale just map of the stage, and I would have each character as a dot, and I would have we kind of went off of a number and grid system. So it's you would be on stage left on number 6, and then the depth of the stage you would be on A, B, C, D, E. So I would put each character in their grid position, and that way I could physically see where they are on the stage from a bird's eye view. That saved my life because I'm a visual learner and I need to see the formations. And that helped me especially with learning which character sits in each chair, because that was horrible to memorize because they sit in different chairs for each scene. So definitely a lot of color coding. Towards the end of the show, when we froze it and we were done with the previews, I had tracking sheets for each character, which is basically I have a Google document online, also color coded, that gives me basic information that whenever I would go on, I would print out and put in my pocket. I would have the piece of paper when I was performing that I could just run off stage and look at the basic information that says, oh, you enter in wing 1, this is your first line, you move this prop, you exit in wing 2, and then the next scene you have to do this. And especially during the days where everyone is entering, and that saved my life. I had tracking sheets, I had a physical copy of the script, I have a digital copy of the script, and I had the slides, a map of the stage. So I had a lot of resources. That's my process.
What advice would you give to somebody who would want to be a swing?
There's so much I could say. I would say be prepared to work really hard. It's a thankless job at the end of the day. And that's not to say that people are mean to us or anything, but it is a thankless job. We're the ones who are last. We might be forgotten sometimes. A lot of people don't know who we are. And that can be at times really mentally challenging, which is not something I was expecting, because it's weird when your job is a performer, but then you don't perform. Your job is to not perform, only if you have to. So I would say just lean on your swing friends, because they are going through the exact thing that you're going through, and you're going to experience the highest of highs when you all make your Broadway debut and you're so excited, and you're going to experience the trenches when you have a million lines to memorize. I'd say befriend your fellow swing and lean on them, and also find your own system. If color coding doesn't work for you, great. A lot of people have note cards, index cards. That doesn't work for me. I didn't do that. But find a system that works for you and stick to it.
You mentioned earlier that Ashley was your Broadway debut. Can you talk a little bit about what your Broadway debut was like?
Oh God, it's a crazy story. Broadway. So the first swing to make their Broadway debut, besides Martine Sola, who's a Broadway veteran, was Marina 2 days before I went on, and this is mid-November. So we're still in previews at this point. One of the onstage actors who played Johanna was out that day, and Marina went on. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh, wait, that means, I was like, it's totally not going to happen. But if Christina, who plays Ashley, has to be out of the show, I'm now the primary cover for Ashley because Marina is in that role. And I was like, oh, I haven't learned the music. I haven't done the blocking. Ashley's like a role I haven't looked at a lot, but I was like, oh, maybe I should review some of my stuff because I was like, I'm the primary cover for this role on Broadway. So I should review my stuff. And I was at a costume fitting during rehearsal because during previews we rehearse during the day, we perform at night. And the associate costume designer comes up to me and said that I should be expecting a call from the assistant director. Like, oh, why is something wrong? And he was like, he might be going on tonight. And I'm like, my heart just like dropped. And I was like, oh my God. So I get a call, assistant director on the phone, and they said someone is sick and they can kind of power through. They're not doing well. I wanted to know if you would feel comfortable doing Ashley tonight. And I said yes. Because I knew, I was like, I can do it. So I'm standing in the sparkly rainbow dress that Caroline has for finale, getting fitted for that. It's a beautiful dress. And Sam, I never got to wear it. But I'm like standing there, like, can I call my parents? And I'm like, get on a train right now and come up to you because I'm making my Broadway debut. And I sprint. This is like 1:30 p.m. So I'm glad I had 6.5 hours notice, but still could have been worse. And I sprint up 6th Avenue and I get to the theater and we have an emergency put in for both Marina and I. It was a blur. My phone was blowing up. And there was a time where I was like, okay, I have to put my phone down. It was crazy. And I would come off stage and the assistant director, Mary, was just literally off stage in the wing. And I would come off stage and I was like, where do I go? Like, where do I enter? What do I do? Could have not done it without her. It's the craziest night of my life. I didn't even have a wig. I did my costume fitting like a few hours before the show because my costumes weren't done for Ashley. It was crazy, but I did it. And I'd never rehearsed or learned the harmonies or anything, but all things considered, it did go well. And like totally bomb or stop the show or anything. It was November, say 17th, somewhere around there.
What inspired you to pursue theater?
I don't know if anything really inspired me. I have been in theater my entire life. Like it's always been something I've just been into. I grew up going to the dance studio. Like I was always dance. I was just always surrounded by dance and art. So it was just always a part of me. And I think deep down inside, I just always knew that this is something I wanted to do. It's kind of just been a part of me. I was very inspired by old Hollywood movie musicals like Singing in the Rain was a great inspiration to me. West Side Story. My family loves West Side Story, but especially Singing in the Rain. I love Gene Kelly. Still do. I think he's just phenomenal. I have a picture of him. Right, I have like 2 pictures of him back there. Just his like mastery of so many different mediums of musical theater and just his stage presence. Yeah, I would watch Singing in the Rain all the time. Pretty much theater has always been for my life.
What were some differences in your costumes versus other people who played the same roles?
I love this. This is one of my favorite parts about being a swing is you get little costume details that no one will notice, but people in the cast will notice. But it's really cool because it's like a little detail that gets to make the character your own. For me personally, I had less shoes just because they wanted to make it easier for me. So if the Mel track had, I think Monty Russell, who played Mel, usually had 3 different shoes throughout the show, and I just kept the same shoe except for the slow dancing scene. So sometimes I had less shoes, but in terms of like patterns, I had a completely different Mel finale costume, and I'm not sure why. A lot of the times it was because the fabric was discontinued or they couldn't get the material anymore. But I had a really cool like finale Mel costume that was completely separate than what Amani wore. And I believe Ayana, who also covered Mel, had a different costume. For Meredith, I had a different tank top underneath than Madison. And I believe I also had different jewelry. A lot of the shoes were minor differences. For Ashley Amigo, I got to customize my rings however I want. They weren't specific about which rings go on which finger or anything. Some of the other swings, I remember Ayana has a different color Mel jacket for some reason. They used the one that Amani used in Syracuse for some reason. And I also had a different belt for Mel too. There are definitely some minor differences, mostly with just like a different color shirt, but there's nothing I would say like major that was super different.
Do you have any favorite costumes you got to wear?
Favorite costume that I wore was Mel Regency costume. That was so beautiful. And a costume designer is a genius for that. That's like the best costume on Broadway. Favorite costume that I had but didn't get to wear. I love Caroline's outfit, the rainbow sweater. I think that's really cool. And also Meredith's Regency outfit is very cool because it has a hood in the back back because Meredith wears a blue hoodie and it's a really cool little detail. And that was fun to try on.
While on the top of costumes, did you have any favorite costumes that you didn't have, like somebody else's costume in the show?
Oh, the Remy Phantom of the Opera costume. Love it. It was so good. Honestly, I think that's the first one that came to mind. That one is such a fierce costume.
What did you end up doing backstage in your downtime when you weren't on?
Sorry, I'm laughing. We had a lot of fun. It's a lot. You basically live with your swings. And in terms of work, I should talk about the actual work that we did. Had lots of fun memories. In terms of work, we would rehearse lines. Sometimes we would practice in the elephant room, but as time went on, we preferred our dressing rooms. A lot of the times we would watch on the monitor, especially during previews. If we missed something that they changed during rehearsal, I'm like, I have to go see what it looks like. Marina was the dance captain, so sometimes she watched the show from backstage and took notes. Further on, I started doing a lot of like in-depth character work and like breaking down scenes. Sometimes I would review choreography. A lot of the times we would work out and I did a lot of physical therapy in there and stretching. And a lot of the times we would just hang out and just talk, and a lot of ordering food. A lot of eating.
When you were backstage, you seemed to film like a lot of TikToks. What was the like behind the scenes of what it was like filming those TikToks?
I think it started with just Colin Hancock and I just messing around. And I was like, there's this really funny guy who does like really dramatic quote readings. I'm like, we have to act it out. So we did it. And then we did another one like a few days later. And then it turned out I would send it we had a cast group chat and I would send it. And people were like, oh my gosh, I want to be in it. So there were times where I would knock on Dez's, who played Remy's, dressing room and just go into his dressing room. And I had a lot of fun with filming with Amani. It was basically just we would come up with the silly ideas on the spot and we would watch back the footage and just laugh. Yeah, I think one TikTok I got like all of the swings to be in it, and I got like Andrew Kober to be in it. I got Ashley Wool to be in it, which is great. At one point. Yeah, those TikToks were just so much fun.
I think those are all the questions that I have.
It's so fun doing this. I miss everyone. I miss the show.
Is there anything you want to plug at the end?
I'm in college still, but I'm available for summer employment. And I'm graduating 2025, so watch out New York City. You can find me on Instagram. It's Mar1. NA, my last name Jansen, JNSEN. The link to my website is there. Yeah, that's how you can find me. I'm on Instagram a lot.
Thank you for doing this interview with me.
Thank you for having me.